4 Tour de France wins out of the last 5, and their marginal gains philosophy seemingly everywhere in cycling and perhaps sport as a whole. At GCN, we believe that Team Sky have fundamentally changed the sport of cycling. And here's how. Are we right? Let us know in the comments down below. Let's get started. Team Sky's management team have played a huge part in the team's success, most notably perhaps Sir Dave Brailsford, who's also performance director at British Cycling until April 2014. British Cycling is the organisation where many of the ideas and philosophies behind Team Sky originated and were first developed. Marginal gains is probably a term that pretty much everyone at Team Sky is sick of hearing, but it's worked. The team have left no stone unturned in their quest for improvements, no matter how small or large the cost. So, although these ideas were initially scoffed at by many others in the cycling world, and a good example is warming up and warming down on turbo trainers before and after road races, you now see Team Sky's initial ideas adopted by many others in the cycling world. And the team aren't going to rest on their laurels. We caught up with Sir Dave Brailsford at one of their extended training camps in Mallorca last year. Here's what he had to say.
By the very nature of this sport, we very rarely get together as an entire group. So for a lot of the time, we'll see each other, little groups will see each other at races, but it's difficult to get the whole group together. So we spend a lot of time in the evenings as a staffing group doing a lot of work. So we'll plan out, I don't know, all of our sports science interventions and how we're going to do what we call performance support. We'll do the race program, we'll do, we'll get all the mechanics together and we'll look at how they're working, sort of procedures, we get all the swannies in and say, right, this is how we're going to work, we'll map it all out.
Brailsford was also particularly clever in who he hired, especially in the case of head coach Tim Kerrison. Kerrison spent 2010 with the team, but in a role where he learned and observed and thought about what he could apply from his background as a swimming coach to his role within cycling. It's all paid off. Kerrison is now one of the most well-respected coaches within the sport of cycling and has played a huge part in the 4 Tour de France victories that Team Sky have to their name. It's fair to say that there were more than a few sceptics out there when Team Sky attempted to apply what British cycling had learnt in the very controlled environment of the velodrome to the way less controlled and more open environment of road racing. And for a year or so, maybe even they themselves started to doubt. However, they soon proved the doubters wrong. Take the 2012 Tour de France. They figured out that the fastest and most efficient way to get to the top of a climb was to ride at a high but steady pace all the way up. So they built a team of strong climbers around time trialist Bradley Wiggins, and when attacking riders like Vincenzo Nibali changed pace and went up the road, the team continued to set the same pace and soon brought these riders back, and Wiggins won the Tour. So it's safe to say that they have figured out an effective way of winning the Tour de France in the mountains and the time trials.
Yeah, I haven't lost it yet. Did you get that?
Although it does have its critics, some people say that it's perhaps not the most entertaining way to win bike races, and Team Sky's rider Geraint Thomas even went as far as to say that he's paid to win bike races and not to be an entertainer. I have to say that I think Chris Froome has perhaps bucked this trend though, especially in the 2016 Tour where it seemed he found a really effective and very entertaining way of winning the race. The classics, on the other hand, have proven far harder for the team to crack. They did win their first monument this year in 2016 with Wout Poels at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but on the whole they have struggled to find a winning formula for this far more unpredictable way of racing. Marginal gains is a philosophy and way of thinking about improving performance that British cycling pioneered and that Team Sky and British Cycling have continued to epitomise. Although they might be a little sick of hearing about it and being asked about it by now. In fact, you might be sick of hearing about it by the end of this video because we are going to mention it a lot. A quick search for marginal gains brings up life hacker articles, links to university management courses and more. And saying that something has changed the world might seem a bit strong for a cycling video, but it's possible that this has at least changed some aspects of the world and started at British Cycling, continued by Team Sky. Think of marginal gains like this. Even if you're at the top of your game at something, you can break down what you're doing, analyze it, and then go on and improve it by a percentage of a percent, or a point of a percent. So say you have 10 things that you improve by 1/10 of a percent, you get a 1% gain. Doesn't sound like much, but then if you look at the results from this year's Tour de France, Chris Froome's winning time of just over 89 hours and his winning margin of 4 minutes and 5 seconds from Romain Bardet, that's just 0.07% over the course of the time, which is minuscule. So think, all of these things that Team Sky work on contribute to those winning margins. The extent to which Team Sky go in pursuit of marginal gains possibly has to be seen to be believed. In fact, they even take duvets, mattresses and pillows along to the hotel for each of the riders. They went further than that at the 2015 Giro though, when they took an RV for Richie Porte to stay in so he didn't even have to stay in hotels. This has affected cycling because we've seen other teams since we started GCN back in 2013 steadily take more team staff, more equipment and more vehicles along to the races. We all looked a bit younger in 2013 too. It was really tempting to bundle in our tech section in with marginal gains, but we know that you all love tech, and the fact is that it's actually easiest to see marginal gains when you can see them physically in front of you on pro bikes. Let's start with stems. Stems might seem like a strange place to start, but if you and I go out to buy a stem, we buy them in 10mm increments. If you're a Team Sky rider, you can get your pro stem in 1mm increments. That's incredible. So, Geraint Thomas rides a 121mm stem on his bike, and it just goes to show how much further Team Sky go than many other pro teams, and how much further their partners go to make sure that their riders get the best treatment possible and so can perform as well as possible. If we look at the bikes, we can actually see through GCN Pro bikes just how much the bikes have changed since 2013. They have a lot of bikes, they take 55 of them to the Tour de France. Let's take a look at a montage of the Team Sky Pro bikes over the last 3 years. Can you spot the differences? You actually have to look quite closely because although the Pinarello frames have clearly changed, the Dura-Ace group sets haven't changed all that much since 2013, although they will change soon when Dura-Ace R9100 comes in. So to find the differences you have to look very closely. To take Chris Froome's extra light climbing bike for the 2016 Tour de France, he has a really pared down and customised Dura-Ace satellite shifter on his tops. That's actually super glued to the bars to save weight. He has a carbon fibre 3D printed Garmin holder and even a carbon fibre 3D printed number holder. One gain that might actually seem like a reverse marginal gain are the bottom brackets. So back in 2013 they had press fit bottom brackets, but since 2014 when the team mechanics requested it, Team Sky have actually had Holotech 2, so slightly more traditional screw-in bottom brackets. Why? Because they're easier to replace and they withstand the elements a little better. So marginal gains philosophy isn't just applied for the riders, it's also applied for the team staff. Team Sky's bikes for the cobbled classics and cobbled stages of the Grand Tours have also shown its approach of constantly refining and improving the equipment that they're riding on. A year ago, Chris Froome had a Pinarello frame with a small suspension unit at the rear, whereas for the Tour of Flanders this year, Luke Rowe was riding a prototype where, instead of having the suspension unit, the flex was built into the frame. Dan actually took a look at it just before the Tour of Flanders.
This one, the K8, is actually in the prototype stages. So Luke Rowe is the only guy on the team at the moment to be riding it. And basically, some of the team were a little bit slow to adapt to the suspension because they only get to ride it really for a couple of races a year. So Pinarello have produced them a bike with the same characteristics, the same geometry, the same tyre clearance, but they've simply removed that rear shock. So this is a little bit more familiar to the guys.
The team's time trial bikes have had a lot of upgrades over the years too. Chris Froome now rides on custom 3D printed time trial bars, actually quite similar to ones that you might see on some British cycling track bikes at the upcoming Olympics. But with time trials, it's not all about really advanced equipment, it's also about getting the basics of having a good position on the bike and just your aerodynamics right. So, with new arrivals like Mikel Landa, Team Sky spend a lot of time testing and refining their positions on the bike in a controlled environment like the Velodrome in Mallorca, which is where Matt and Dan caught up with them.
And then we've got a funky bit of software here from a company called Alpha Mantis, and what that enables us to do, it pulls all that data in and basically gives us a really easy live feedback tool. So rather than doing painstaking analysis or post effort, it's straight in front of us and it's right, so it helps us make better decisions quicker. Team
Sky spend a lot of time calculating exactly what equipment their riders should use on a given time trial course on a given day. So on stage 18 of this year's Tour de France, Chris Froome was actually the only rider to go for a full TT setup, including a disc wheel. And that paid off because he went on to win the stage. It does seem wrong to call it a gamble though, because I'm really not sure that Team Sky make those. Anyway, Dan got to see Chris Froome's bike before the stage and find out exactly the decision-making process that went in to choosing that setup.
Pinarello have updated their Bolide time trial bike for 2016, and there's a few redesigns. It's lighter, but of course it's more aerodynamic as well. This looks fairly unique at the back here, doesn't it? This is the cover of the rear caliper, and this design apparently reduces the amount of turbulence where the air sometimes can get stuck here at the rear of the bike as it passes.
Team Sky and their sponsors are always working together to push on and create products that will benefit the riders as much as possible. Take saddle sponsor Physique, for example. Physique already create a huge range of saddles, so there is probably one to suit every backside on the team. But that doesn't stop them customizing covers or shapes to suit every rider as much as possible. Muc-off, who sponsored Team Sky for bike cleaning and lubrication, developed hydrodynamic chain lube for the team. Chain lube might not seem like an area where there's much to gain, but it's definitely something that can be worked on, and if your chain rolls more efficiently, you will ultimately ride faster. And to show how far Sky and their sponsors pushed to develop these products, Muc-off actually had to create a new bit of testing equipment to make the hydrodynamic lube. Helmet sponsor Kask are an original Team Sky partner, and most of their top range of helmets now was developed with the team. The Protone is a cross between a lightweight, well-ventilated and aerodynamic helmet, so the best of all three worlds there. The Infinity helmet is an all-out aero helmet, but it has a sliding vent. So what that means is when it gets a bit hot, you can let some air in, but when it's really grim, so think races like the Spring Classics, you can shut all of the elements out too. A particular area of development has been the time trial helmet. So Sky started with the Bambino, which was shorter than time trial helmets had traditionally been. And at the 2016 Tour, they've gone for the Bambino Pro Evo TT, which not quite as short as the original Bambino, but not quite as long as the old school aero helmets that we're used to seeing 5-10 years ago. So through their partnerships with their sponsors, we can see that British cycling's ethos of pushing forward and gaining wherever a gain can be made really manifests itself with Team Sky. And the good news is that under UCI regulations, many of the products used on the bikes will actually reach us end consumers eventually. Team Sky have a very sophisticated rider support setup. I counted 55 members of staff on the team's website, compared to 29 riders, so almost double. And at the recent Tour de France, there were 34 personnel for 9 riders. Matt and Dan found out a bit more about how Team Sky support their riders with Rod Ellingworth at the Team Sky Mallorca training camp.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to it really. I think a lot of people forget what it's actually called a training camp. So that's what we try and do, is train at the camp. Yep. Where I think a lot of teams have too much going off around the camp. So they have a lot of, lots of media, lots of sort of sponsor stuff going off. So we try and minimise that as much as we can. And we try and do that in the October camp where we don't have any cycling. Okay. So lots of interviews and all that sort of stuff. So here we can concentrate on the training and the lads just get out there and do what they have to do and prepare for racing.
Team Sky's team buses are built around making the riders feel as comfortable as possible and providing them with a home away from home for before and after the races. Nicknamed the Death Star by other cycling teams, Matt went a bit Darth Vader when he took a look around.
Obi-Wan, we meet again.
Here we are. Straight away, no expense spared at all, and this is essentially the benchmark that all other World Tour team buses are measured by.
Nutrition is one of the most important areas for any sports person, and Team Sky have a performance nutritionist and 2 team chefs alongside nutrition sponsors Science and Sport to support them here. Each rider has a tailored diet plan that includes Science and Sport products for race and training days, and we spoke to Henrik Orr, their chef, at their Mallorca training camp to find out a bit more about what the riders like to eat.
Well, we would be looking at something that not too heavy for your stomach, so steak wouldn't work, for example. We would do something light with fish, chicken would be perfect, and then we would make sure there's a lot of carbs ready for them. They always have a variation of 4 different carbs every night, being rice, quinoa, potatoes, or pasta.
At the same training camp, we also caught up with James Morton, their performance nutritionist, to find out the general theory behind Sky's diet plans and their nutrition.
The number one goal really is to replenish all of the carbohydrate that you've used. That's the first and foremost, that's what we're trying to achieve. Second, and by no means second in importance, is protein intake after the race, because during a hard stage you're effectively in a state of protein breakdown, if you like, and then what you need to do is ingest high quality protein to help the muscle recover. And then last but not least is obviously dehydration. So again, depending on the temperature of the race, you'll lose a lot of fluid. We need to put that fluid back in quite quickly. And all three of those things go hand in hand so that the next day we're ready to race again, if you like.
Although we're saying that Team Sky have changed the sport of cycling, if not sport as a whole, one thing that hasn't changed is the commitment and the dedication required from the riders. So we thought we'd leave you with a few words from Chris Froome in 2012, before he'd won any Tour de France.
I'm sure there are expectations and added pressure, as you say, but yeah, I'm trying not to think of it like that. I'm just, as I said, just going to carry on doing things the way I've always done, and I'm not going to be trying any harder because I'm already trying my hardest, so that's not going to change anything.
From their British cycling beginnings through to their marginal gains philosophy, we do believe here at GCN that Team Sky have changed the sport of cycling and probably had a huge influence on sport as a whole. But do you agree? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up too. If you'd like to see more GCN content about Team Sky, we've put together a playlist with all the videos that we've made with the team. That's right there. And to see our latest video with Team Sky, which is a marginal gains packed Chris Froome's extra light climbing bike, just click down there. To subscribe to GCN, click on the globe, it should be about there, and to visit our shop, click on me.